This is the Double Doink Dynasty League podcast with Boyer, Andy, and your host, Tyler.
It's impossible.
Season's going to end on a double doink.
Welcome back to the Double Doink Dynasty podcast, presented by your performance enhancing dads. What's happening, fellas? This feels weird because we just did one, but they don't know that. So what's happening, fellas?
They know now.
I'm shocked that you got the name right.
Hey, small steps. We've done this like 10 times over the course of the last so long. I'm figuring out the name. Don't worry about it.
I don't think you've gotten it wrong all this year.
All 3 times? I'm impressed.
I mean, we've been doing the other one. You could have fucked that one up.
That's true. I don't know why people put me in charge of things.
I mean,
I don't think anybody
started this.
I don't think anybody put you in charge. I think you put you in charge.
It was more like by default.
All right. Well, so we're back. We're doing our thing. And we have a shit ton of trades. I mean, a lot of trades to go through. Sorry, YouTube. I'm not supposed to say. We have a lot of trades to go through. So we're specifically going to hit trades, dynasty trades. Here we go. We're going to jump all the way back to October 7th, right after our last podcast. This one missed it. Andy sent DJ Moore a 23 first, a 24 third, and he got back Miles Sanders, Brandon Ayuk, and a 23 third. So DJ Moore, Matoon's first and 23, a third, and he gets back Sanders, Ayuk, and a 23 third. Boyer, quick thoughts on that one?
I think there was only 1 week that Andy might have been regretting that was when DJ Moore went off like we know he can, but then he's been terrible since. So good trade for Andy. He's been contending this year, and this was definitely a contender move. And I think it's worked out for him so far. Andy, I'm a little surprised that your team was doing so well. But then when I looked at it as far as like how this year goes, I guess I probably shouldn't have been quite as surprised because you got a good team, and I like the idea of trying to bolster it up.
Yeah, so this move happened right after Javonte went down. I needed that second running back because I wasn't real comfortable playing Singletary and bye weeks were coming. So I was like, I need something. And I want to say Nolan reached out to me. I don't remember exactly how it went because it's been a month now, but Nolan reached out and the price was right. It's like, well, losing DJ Moore is a bummer because I like him. But at the same time, at that point in the year, he had been shitting the bed hard. And I was like, I don't care. Like, if this is what it takes to fix my team for right now for this season, do it. Not an issue losing DJ Moore. Giving up the first to get Miles Sanders feels fair. Moving up a year in third round picks, fine. Like I gain a little bit there, but they're third round picks, so I'm not real worried about it. Getting Ayuk back though has been better than expected. I've had to play him a handful of times because of the Mike Williams injury, and he's been doing great. So I feel like he's been pretty much matching what Moore's been doing,
if not more.
Yeah. So I'll say that I'm very happy with this trade.
Yeah.
Was that intentional, Ty?
I mean, more or less.
He's doing
There's
it
the
again.
performance enhancing dad portion of the podcast. Got it out of the way early.
No, I agree. Miles Sanders at that point for a first, especially Matoon's, it's going to be the bottom 3. Whatever. That's fine. Ayuk for DJ Moore at that point, I'm not mad about it. I like Ayuk almost as much as I like Moore at this point. If not, I might like Brandon Ayuk more. He's on a team but he's on a team that's going to score.
I mean, let's calm it down. Ayuk is not the cornerstone of a whole franchise, Tyler.
Oh, my fault. My bad. And then flipping the thirds, whatever. It doesn't matter. We talked about how good thirds are in a past podcast, so we know how that goes. So all in all, I think that was a good trade. And I'm not opposed to it on Nolan's side either, just because he got the first. And really, that's what he needed at this point. And he's going to end up screwing that first up anyway. I'm sorry, Nolan. I'm not ragging on you, man. Don't get upset with me. But I think it was good on both sides. So let's move on. Now Nolan deals with Lesack. Nolan sends Gerald Everett, Isaiah McKenzie, and a 24 fifth to Lesack, and Nolan gets back Logan Thomas, a 24 third and a 25 third. So Everett, McKenzie, and a fifth for Logan Thomas and 2/3.
I don't
Anybody
really
have-
have any thoughts on that one. It's kind of just a shuffle of picks and players. Like I don't have any strong opinion on it.
I thought it was great
It's,
for
it's
Nolan.
fine.
2/3 for a couple of guys that he doesn't really need right now. They're not like young upside guys that you're going to be missing. So adding the 2/3 for Colin Nolan, great move. At this point, Lesack was still trying to grab some pieces to do something this year, and it eventually didn't pan out. But this was 4 weeks ago, and I applaud him trying to add a couple of pieces for cheap, but it ended up being a really, really good move for Nolan.
Yeah, and Gerald Everett's better than Logan Thomas. Adding Isaiah McKenzie, which had a possibility of playing at certain points. I like it on both sides, like Andy said. So I'm good with it. Nothing super big on it, but it is what it is. So moving on, Underhill trades a 24 third to Mattoon for Russell Gage. This was back when Russell Gage was going to be playing. Godwin was out. Evans was dealing with some issues. Everything was kind of going downhill for that wide receiver core in Tampa Bay. They brought in Russell Gage, so Underhill went and got Gage for a third. Boyer, you want to start us on that one?
Yeah, sorry. That's something I'm gonna have to visually look at.
I thought it was good at the time. Third round pick, 2 years out for a guy who could help you quite a bit this year, but probably not long term. Undy's team at the time, I believe, was somewhere around 4-3, maybe, doing decent and looking to add a cheap piece to help you maintain your momentum and maybe make a small push this year, keep you in it at least while you figure out what you're doing. Smart, I think, really what you want to do at that point, not sell the farm and go all in when it might not work out, but at least buy yourself some time. And it just didn't end up working out. Russell Gage, hasn't really done much, but we didn't know that at the time. The upside was worth the price he paid.
Yep, I'd agree. It was all about the upside. There was injuries with Godwin and Evans and everything else, and they brought Gage in, and Brady wanted Gage, and he's just not been anything. But
Yeah,
like you said at the time, I was okay with it. Boy, you gonna jump in on anything? Or are we good? You're looking at
Yeah,
it.
I
Pretty
think the
intently.
value was probably right either way. I mean, Gage has been a decent player for when he was over in Atlanta too. So whether or not it panned out this year, like the value's fine either way. So
yeah. From
All right.
Mattoon's perspective, Russell Gage was probably the last guy on his bench, so getting a third round pick for that really just sucks that we're in a league with Mattoon. Because good for you, get it while you can get it, man.
Yep. All right. So then Lesack trades Jimmy G to Colin Kelly, the current 6-3 Colin Kelly, for a 23 third. So Jimmy G for a 23 third.
I mean, I'm just going to assume that it was to fill in some bye weeks or an injury. I don't remember too much about what Kelly's team was going through at the time, but a third is fine. I mean, if this was going Underhill, this would have been a first, would have been involved somewhere. So, yeah, I mean, Jimmy G's not the greatest quarterback, but he now has a ridiculous amount of weapons. And before that, Debo and what they could do. There's at any given week he could be a fine quarterback to have to fill in for buys and injuries and stuff. So makes sense to me. And
Well,
Kelly's been a
it-
surprise. So
And Kelly's sitting on Stafford and Russell Wilson, which have both been bad. Garoppolo has been
Yeah.
better than both of them the last 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, so the trade then makes 100% sense with those guys. I mean, 4 weeks ago, we already knew that those guys were struggling too. So he was looking for, I'm guessing, a cheap answer, hoping that one of them would pull it out. And if they didn't, then he'd have a guy that he could plug and play. And that's exactly what he got.
Yeah, so I went back and looked. Week 7 was the week that the Rams were on a bye. It was also the week that Russell Wilson sat because he tweaked something. So he picked Jimmy G up specifically for that. Jimmy G got him 19 points. He won 99-95 that week. Great buy.
I believe that's the week he played me, so I'm not happy about it, but it's fine.
He played Undy that week.
Oh, good. But yeah, no, I was just looking at that as well. So, yep. And to be honest, having Jimmy G, like, yeah, you have Stafford and you have Wilson, but Jimmy G is a pretty consistent player at this point. And to give up a third, whatever. We know what thirds are worth. So here we go. Now we get to Underhill gives me Mahomes and a second. I give Underhill Matt's 23 first, my 25 first, and a 24 fourth.
Go ahead,
So I gave
Boyer.
up 2 firsts and a fourth to get Underhill's Mahomes and a second.
Yeah, so I know Underhill wanted 2 first, which for a 1 quarterback league seems high even for a guy like Mahomes. But I mean, when you also look at it, Mahomes is going to give you another 10 years or whatever of excellent quarterback play. The timing probably wasn't super great for you, just as like a rebuilding team. You wouldn't normally want to do that at this point, maybe closer to when you were ready to contend. But like, who's to say Mahomes would have been available then? Like, you got to take advantage of these times when you have them, because how often does a Mahomes and Allen, someone like that become available in Dynasty? Probably very rarely. So I can't fault you for taking advantage of it. Your team with Kenneth Walker now coming up and stuff, like, it actually looks like it's shaping up and forming out, and we could see you contending next year because of the trade. So I can't fault you for what you paid, because I think the way that you want to build your team is already getting closer than maybe what we thought even just 6 weeks ago. So I think it's a good trade for you. And Underhill gets the 2 first that he was wanting for him. So makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like Mahomes was undervalued in this deal. I think Mahomes is worth 2 firsts plus, maybe 3 firsts is what I told Ty. And maybe I'm wrong there, but Mahomes has been a top 3 quarterback since he entered the league 4 or 5 years ago. I've lost track at this point. He doesn't show any signs of stopping, even with some of his weapons not being. I mean, he doesn't have Tyreek Hill this year. He's still a top 2 fantasy quarterback. So Ty adding him and completely turning his team around, because I think we've all agreed that Ty's team's been crap. And between Kenneth Walker and now Mahomes, we're like, oh, Ty's teams looks decent. And one more piece, and he could be pushing playoffs next year. Like, if all it took was a 23 first, a 25 first, but he gets a second back, you get to add Pat Mahomes for the next 10 years. I'd do that 7 days out of 7, man. I think the value was too low here. I mean, Undy got what he could get. He's got Hurts too, so I can't fault him for getting what was out there to make the move and sell the guy. It's not his fault he wasn't getting any better offers. But if I didn't have Burrow, I'd tell you sure shit I'd been bidding more than Ty did.
Yeah, and
I was
I
on the same
wasn't
way
sure
with
what it was
Herbert.
going to cost. I wasn't sure what it was going to cost. I had been reaching out to Underhill for like a month straight. Like, yo, what's it going to take? What's it going to take? And he's like, I don't know. Like, I haven't really gotten any solid offers. And I'm like, well, just let me know what you want. And he never really got back to me on it. And finally I was like, all right, man, like, it's going to take probably 2 first. Give me a second back and we'll call it good. Cause I'm like, at this point, you don't have any offers on the table.
Yeah.
So let me try to grab a second out of you, like. So I'd been reaching out to him for a while, trying to figure out how I can get Mahomes, because I was nervous about buying in this year because I knew that I wasn't contending this year.
Right.
It's going to kill my max points for it. I don't have my own first. I have my own second, But what's the 202 versus the 204, 205? At this point, I'm not worried about that three spot drop off. It's going to hurt Paul more than it's going to hurt me. He doesn't get the 102, he gets the 105.
Yeah.
Like that's worse on Paul than it is on me. So at that point I said, what the hell? And then I'm giving him a 25 first. My hope is at this point I can be contending in 25, and that's going to be a late pick as well.
Yeah.
So
I don't know what the points for looks like, but Matt is like third worst record right now. So his 23 first could be a higher one, which, a handful of years from now might change our opinions on this. But, what are you going to do? You got to make your splash now. You're getting a known quantity, and I support that all the time.
Yep. Matt is max points for almost 900, where there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 people under him max points for, and then one right at 900. So he's 300 or 3 points behind Burns.
So he's probably going to be about 5 or 6, not 3, where his record's putting him. All right, fair enough.
Yep. And things could change, but right now he's sitting in that consolation championship range. So
yeah,
we'll see. But it is what it is. I wasn't worried about giving up those first if I can get a player that's gonna push me to where I want to be. I'm ready to compete. I feel like my young wide receivers are doing what I need to do. So then Mattoon sends my 23 fourth, Boyer's 24 second, and a 25 fourth. So 2 fourths and a second to Boyer to get Kareem Hunt. Andy, you want to start on that one?
Yeah, I'm ignoring the fourths because late picks are late picks. A second rounder for Kareem Hunt feels a bit high to me for what amounts to a handcuff for Mattoon. Good for Boyer for getting it, but at that point in the year, this was late October. It's not like Kareem Hunt had been doing very much. There were some trade rumors, so maybe that upped the value a little bit, but I imagine Mattoon made this move because he's got Chubb and wanted just to lock it in because that's good football. But it feels a bit high. A second plus 2 fourths is a fair amount.
Yep. Boyer?
Hunt's standalone value has gone down since last year. He's 27 or so. Mattoon wanted him as a handcuff, and with the emergence of Dameon Pierce, I felt comfortable enough moving him off the roster and feeling okay about my depth. So, I think like maybe 4 firsts in the next 3 years, which feels good. But I had also been missing a lot of like seconds and thirds. So getting the second back, and then adding a couple fourths just to add some picks and see what I can't do with them as far as taxi goes, and just shoot my darts. Felt good. So, I mean, if Hunt ends up taking over for Chubb like on an injury, or if he had gotten traded, this would have looked real bad. But so far that hasn't happened, and Chubb should still be fine throughout the year to continue being the workhorse he's been. So I feel pretty good about it.
Yep. So then we go back to Boyer, sending Chase Claypool to Nolan for Andy's second and Marquise Goodwin, which Marquise Goodwin the week before this, I think, went off with Metcalf or Lockett or somebody that wasn't playing. Goodwin or it was that when DK went down probably. Yeah. So then Goodwin came in, had a great second half of that game. Had DK been out and Goodwin stayed in, maybe that makes a difference, but it didn't. So Goodwin is just a bench stash at that point. So Chase Claypool for a 23 second. I'm okay with it. Claypool was nothing in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's offense was looking bad. Even now with the Bears offense, I mean, you guys always rag on the Bears pass offense. Like, getting a second for Claypool, I'm okay with that value.
Yeah. Claypool's young. He's a talented athlete. His rookie season showed a lot of promise, but at the time that Boyer dealt him, had been doing shit. Pittsburgh looked bad. Getting a late second out of him was great. And then at this point, seeing where he landed, I don't love the landing spot. Not from a fantasy standpoint. The Bears throw for 150 yards a week. There's not enough there to sustain a fantasy wide receiver. So
especially two of them.
yeah. So I think a second rounder for that. Boyer added in these last two trades a couple of second rounders for guys that I don't think were worth it. I think these guys were worth a couple of thirds.
Yeah,
Or-
on this one, Chase hadn't been doing much, and like I said, I was kind of looking at just offloading some of these guys because my wide receiver depth was crazy too. I had Jacoby Myers on the bench who had been playing well. I had Gabe Davis. Like those guys were playing over Chase Claypool every single week for me. So it just felt like extra, kind of like what we've talked about with Mattoon, where it's like he just sends those extra guys for extra picks. No one wanted him because he was young, and he offered Goodwin as like a throw in, as like a handcuff to Metcalf, and I was like, well, fine. Like I'll throw him on a roster and see what happens. But I felt good about the second. I spent a third for him, so I was able to more or less get him for a third and flip him for a second, which feels great. I like him on the Bears, but I think they're probably going to add a wide receiver early in the draft anyway. And then there'll be what should be a talented rookie, Mooney and Claypool. And as a Bears fan, I guess be really excited. But as a fantasy perspective, that means that there's going to be a lot there to feed on an offense that I don't know if Justin Fields will ever be the great thrower of our time. I think he might be a lot of Lamar Jackson. And we've seen what those fantasy receivers minus Andrews has had trouble with the consistency. So I think that that's probably what's going to happen, and I feel good about the trade.
Yep. All right. So Underhill sends Marquise Hollywood Brown and a 24 fourth to Nolan for a 25 first rounder. Hollywood Brown and a fourth for a first rounder. Hollywood Brown is a solid wide receiver. As
He was
long as
hurt
he
at the time of this deal.
right. And he's still hurt. But if somehow, some way he becomes the number one and Hop leaves, maybe this is fine. But I'm not giving up a first for Hollywood Brown, let alone a injured Hollywood Brown at this point. At the beginning of the year without Hop, when Hop was suspended and Hollywood was getting all the work, maybe. But Nolan didn't need Hollywood Brown early in the season for a first to compete. I'm not okay giving up that first right now for Hollywood.
Yeah, it's a 25 first, so that helps a little, but Hopkins is back and the pretty clear number one. Granted, we haven't seen both of them play together, so maybe not. But we
But
don't.
Rondale Moore is also looking good as the two right now.
Yeah. So at the very least, we don't know. I think it's unlikely that Hollywood steps back into the number one role. I think Hop's got that locked down. I think that it is likely that Hollywood takes quite a bit away from Rondale Moore when he comes back, but that's assuming that he comes back healthy. And Nolan's not really trying to do much for this year anyways, but I don't know. At this point, I think the 25 first was Nolan's only first round pick, and seeing him use that to get Hollywood doesn't fix things for his team. Granted, it was 3 years forward in time, but I flipped my first round pick for Tyreek Hill. That is significantly different than flipping a first round pick for Hollywood Brown. And yeah, the fact that mine was a 22 first rounder versus Nolan's 25 first rounder does account for some of that. There's still a pretty big gap there. So I don't love it. Maybe it works, but I don't love it.
Nolan does have Mattoon's first from previous trade. So before he does have a late first right now.
Okay.
Not that makes it a whole lot better, but he does have a late first.
So Nolan called me on this trade before he made it, and one of my thoughts, and I tried to talk him out of it. The value may or may not be there, but he's got a bunch of young wide receivers, and he's going to be in a perpetual rebuild if he keeps on sending his first for these type of guys, unless he thinks that some of these guys are going to pan out and he's going to be able to sell them for more than what he originally paid for him. But I didn't like it from a roster construction standpoint at this point. He's got so many young wide receivers. We've talked in length about him not having a great draft picks because of what's happened as far as his sell and buy back and forth. And I said, man, like this is the same pattern that got you in trouble. Stop buying, hold your firsts, and trust your young wide receivers to come out and look good, so you can suddenly put these first into a running back, maybe contend in 25. And yeah, he liked Hollywood a lot. I mean, go get your guys if that's what you want to do. But I think in his position, this was not a trade he could necessarily afford. If he had a bunch of firsts, sure, but I don't think in this position he should have done it.
And Hollywood's only 25. He'll be 26 next.
Oh, we're losing Ty. Ty, your internet gave out after 2 hours. So another thing that I want to compare it to is I feel like you need to have a little bit more of a known quantity if you're giving up a first rounder. Like I gave a first rounder to get Miles Sanders after Miles Sanders started being good. And Nolan gave a first rounder to get Hollywood Brown. Like the next trade that we're going to go to, if Ty comes back, I'm going to just move us there because we've talked a lot about this Hollywood deal now, is Andrew gives up DeAndre Hopkins and Matt gives up a 24 first. Hopkins at that point in time had come back, shown that he had his shit together and was the number one option and a very good fantasy receiver and is justifiable in somebody giving up a first round pick for him to make a push. That's not a move Nolan wants to make because he's not making a 1 or 2 year push adding Hopkins here. So, perspectives are different there. But I feel like if you're giving up a first, you want to get a known quantity, and that's not what happened in the Hollywood deal, in my opinion. But let's talk about Andrew giving up Hopkins for a first, and then we can probably lump it in with the next one. Andrew gave up Diggs and 2 fourths to Mattoon for a 23 Undy first and a 24 Nolan first. Those are probably going to be early firsts.
They'll probably be 5. I mean, so
yeah.
Good enough.
Right. So Andrew gives up Hopkins and Diggs, who are 30 and 29 years old, and adds 3 first round picks in the next 2 years. And it's Matt's 24 first, which Matt's team's probably not holding on next year, in my opinion. So these are early firsts, guys. I think this is a great haul for Andrew. Andrew was a team we were looking at as a playoff contender coming into the year with Jonathan Taylor and Dak and CeeDee Lamb and all of that.
Diggs and Hopkins.
Yeah, and Diggs has been great. Hopkins obviously was suspended. Jonathan Taylor's done jack shit. Dak got hurt. CD wasn't great. So a lot of things just didn't go right for Andrew. And looking at it, he's got these older receivers. He's not making playoffs this year, and he just turned 2 studs into a whole lot of future draft capital that he can either sit on or turn around and add a guy like Hollywood. Not Hollywood. Don't add Hollywood.
Yeah, I thought that the Hopkins I thought was worth maybe 2 seconds. Felt a little bit more accurate just because of his age and where he was at. But and I was in on that. I was like, hey, I was interested. He got the first. He pulled the trigger. But I was like, I'm not going to give you a first for Hopkins at this point. So I think that's good value. And then the 2 early firsts. I never got told about the Diggs trade. I'm a little upset because I probably would have tried to put an offer, but I didn't have the early first to go with that Mattoon did, so I wouldn't have gotten him. But absolutely, I would have probably put something similar together. And the fact that he did it, I think this is probably the right time because Diggs isn't going to do anything for him now, and you don't want to be holding the bag when Diggs' age catch up to him. So great haul. You could see a clear plan for Andrew where he just decided to bite the bullet and just start sending his players, and he's getting a very good value, I think, out of all those players when he does sell them.
Yep.
Yep. I'm good with those. So then Fry sends off Rondale Moore, 2 seconds, and Robbie Anderson to Lesac for Juju and Jeff Wilson and a 4th. So Andrew picks up Rondale Moore, Robbie Anderson. I don't really care about Robbie Anderson, but Rondale Moore at this point is a good young wide receiver, as much as we've trashed on him. And then 2 seconds to move off of Jeff Wilson and Juju. I think Juju is a big piece here. I don't know how long Jeff Wilson will be a big piece here. But to grab Rondale Moore in 2 seconds as a rebuilder at this point, I like it. For Fry, grabbing Juju and Jeff Wilson makes total sense. The 2 guys they can plug in and start making a push with. So I like this. I like this trade on both sides.
Yeah, they're another surprise team for this year, and going and adding Jeff Wilson and Juju there just to have guys that they can roster and make that push make a lot of sense. And they only had to give up a couple seconds and a young wide receiver and freaking Robbie Anderson. Makes sense to them. And I'm not sure that Andrew was going to get much better than that unless they held on to Juju maybe throughout the year, hope that he really flashed and got a first for him. But you're hoping at that point. So get your picks and move on. So I think it makes sense for both teams as well.
Yeah, I saw Fry as a playoff contender this year. They've got a bit of a window here. I thought that this was a really smart move because they did need to add a receiver, especially if they were losing Rondale Moore. And Juju's been hot. He seems to be the guy, at least the guy after Kelsey in Kansas City, which is a big deal. I think that's an upgrade at wide receiver. And then adding Jeff Wilson, they're starting Raheem Mostert most weeks, and that's been working for him. But with Jeff Wilson coming to town, and especially after all the carries that he got in the Bears game, I think adding him to make sure that they weren't losing a running back effectively as they try to make this playoff push was great. Giving up 2 seconds and Rondale Moore in a vacuum for these players might be a bit much, but I think it makes sense given where they're at and what they're trying to do. Getting a 25-year-old Juju on the Kansas City Chiefs could pay big dividends later too. So I like it.
Yep. And Juju being a young receiver, he's fine. He's got years to go still. It's not like they just paid up for 2 old guys that aren't going to make it. So, all right. Next, Nolan sends a 23 third, a 24 third, and Conklin to Fry for Zach Ertz. Warrior, you want to jump us into this one? A third, a fourth, and Conklin for Zach Ertz.
2/3.
Oh, yep, you're right.
Yep.
2/3 in Conklin for Zach Ertz.
We've talked Jer Fry making a push. So Ertz is, the better tight end option for them starting for this year. Probably not going to get much going next year.
Flip it. Jer Fry got 2/3 in Conklin. Jer Fry gave up Ertz.
Oh. Okay, never mind. That makes no sense. No. I don't know why Nolan's trying to get Ertz. Like, it's not like he's contending by any means. So again, we talked about it. Hold on to your picks, man. Like, stop sending them. It doesn't make any sense. Jer Fry getting Conklin. I think he's had a couple okay games, yeah. But like, I don't know if he's been any better than Ertz. And I feel like if you're contending, you probably want to keep Ertz, but maybe they thought they could move those 2/3 for a different tight end or do something with it. I'm not sure. Andy, what do you got?
Does anybody know how old Zach Ertz is?
He's like 31 or 32. Yeah.
He is 32 years old. I hate this trade for both teams.
It doesn't make sense.
Jer Fry is now looking at Higbee, who's been getting worse by the week and wasn't scoring touchdowns even when he was getting looks, and Conklin at tight end. They've also got Hunter Henry, who hasn't really been doing anything. So you've got bodies, but none of them are as good as Zach Ertz. And Jer Fry's window is now adding a couple of thirds doesn't really move the needle for me in terms of like, oh, we had to get some picks back to cover our ass if we don't make playoffs. Like, just sit on Ertz, give yourself the best chance to win now. And I think Ertz, compared to any of the other three guys that they now have, is far better and a clear starter. I that this was this week, so I think Ertz has been down a little bit since Hopkins came back, but even still, he's better than the other guys that they've got. And then from Nolan's perspective, why the fuck are you trading draft picks, even if they're the last pick of the 5th round, for a 32-year-old tight end? Just don't have a tight end. Like, I know that Irv Smith is replaced by Hawkinson, and that's a bummer. And you don't have any real good tight end prospects, but who cares? Like, you're not playing for anything this year. You don't need to plug that hole. Just put a body like Conklin in until a year from now when you're starting to try to figure something out. But Zach Ertz isn't figuring that out, because by the time your team's good, even next year is going to be when you've got Rondale Moore and DeAndre Hopkins and Hollywood Brown, who's also on your team, all fighting for targets in the month and a half before Call of Duty comes out, before this offense implodes. So I don't see what value Zach Ertz brings to Nolan's team, and it definitely takes value away from Jer Fry's team. I hate this trade for both teams.
Yeah,
Yep. I would agree. Even on the target share, like Zach Ertz was between 6 and 11 targets while Hopkins was out. And then he had 4 targets in week 7 when Hopkins came back, 5 targets in week 8, and then 8 targets again last week. And he has had 1 touchdown each week for the last 2. Like, that's the upside Jer Fry needs. Can you get 40 yards and a touchdown out of your tight end? Cool. Get yourself 9-10 points and call it good.
Yeah, the for Nolan, the 2/3. I mean, we've seen good tight end prospects get to the 3rd round, consistently, at least in the first couple of years. So why would you send those thirds, which is perfect for grabbing tight ends in a rebuild, for a guy who maybe gives you those 9 points now, which you don't want because you want to tank. So whatever picks of your own that you still have are still high. And then he'll he's going to fall off a cliff at some point, or maybe he sells them, in the off season to someone who's contending and wants to add the depth. But I don't get it from Nolan's perspective. I really don't get it from Jer Fry's perspective. That's why when you said the names, I was like, I just assumed that it was flipped.
Would have made a lot of sense.
More sense to me. So it wasn't. It was that's why in my brain it just didn't register that it made sense unless it was the other way.
Yep. All right. So anyway, let's move on. There's two last trades here. They're just a pick swap for a player. Burns sends a 25 third to Paul for Marcus Mariota. At this point, Burns is filling Aaron Rodgers' spot.
Yeah, he's got that thumb injury. Yeah.
But I guess you had Deshaun Watson still out.
Yeah, Watson's coming back in a couple of weeks. Ride with Rodgers, pick somebody up off of waivers if you have to, but I'm not moving a pick to add a body for just a couple of weeks. Wait till Watson comes back. Burnsy's 4-5. Maybe he makes consolation, but he's not making playoffs this year, so
yeah. But
I don't get it.
Like Mariota for a third, even if it's in 25, that's like Mariota could be out of the league by the end of the year. So
yeah, it's small change on either side, but I just don't get it.
Andy Dalton, Taylor Heineke, PJ Walker, Sam Ellinger are all out on waivers. They're all starting quarterbacks. You could at least put them in the lineup and call it good.
Right. If that's what you wanted to do. Yeah, I agree.
But,
no reason to give up draft capital for that.
Picking up Dalton or picking up Heineke is just as good as trading a third for Mariota.
Or just rolling with Rodgers. If he's bad, he's bad. But Rodgers isn't any better or worse than any of these guys we're talking about at this point.
Right. But those are the only 4 starting quarterbacks that are out there and available. But I'm not giving up a third for a quarterback if there's somebody available. I get we're a 1 quarterback league, but quarterbacks are being held because we're a deep league.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I get there's not a lot of quarterbacks on waivers, but there are 4 there available that are all starters. I'm not
Yeah, and
trading any
and they're
picks
gonna-
for a third string quarterback.
And they could do just as good as Mariota this week. So
All right. Well, we've exhausted that one. All right. So Paul trades Deontay Foreman to Colin Kelly for a 24 third. So Paul gives up Foreman for a 24 third.
I like this for Kelly. I mean, I think Foreman's going to start, and he's been fine. He's gotten points. He's a good depth piece for just a third. If you're making a push, makes sense. Paul's been kind of rebuilding. He's actually second in the division, but I don't think that he's actually going to make any serious run or anything. So go get your pick. I can't imagine Foreman will be worth much after, say, this year, but who knows? But I like it for both sides. I really like it for Kelly.
Yeah, I think it made a lot of sense. Foreman's probably not a long-term solution for Carolina. And Paul's not trying to win this year. He's moving some pieces off to not win this year because he's still. I think his window's coming up pretty shortly, but it's not here yet. So getting rid of Foreman to help your max points 4 and adding a 3rd round pick makes a lot of sense for Paul. Collins sitting pretty at 6 and 3 for wild card. Really, the only competition he's got for wild card right now is Jerfry. Everybody else is 2 games back. Not to say they couldn't do it. I think there's what do we got? 5 games left, 6 games left in the regular season. So, it's no sure thing. But Collins in a pretty good spot for playoffs right now, and adding a guy like Foreman's definitely not going to hurt.
Yeah. I'm all about it. I think Foreman's as much as everybody's talking about Chuba Hubbard coming back and taking work, as long as Foreman shows out, I think Foreman's going to be the lead back there, and Chuba's just going to give him breathers, come in on pass down work. But it's not he's not going to take over for Foreman unless Foreman shows that he's bad. So I don't know. We'll see. I like the trade, especially for Paul to grab a third. Like, good for you, man. Get him, because like Boyer said, Foreman's not going to be a starter after this year. He may be the backup. He may get traded. He may find a new home. But if Carolina's smart, they're grabbing another running back. There's no reason they ride with Foreman and Chuba Hubbard. Outside of they need to keep rebuilding, and then in that case, maybe Foreman gets another year, and then it looks really great for Paul. But I don't see it happening. So I'm good with this on both sides.
Agreed.
So, all right. With that, that's all the trades we got. We will come back with you guys with some more content here in the next couple weeks. We'll come up with something fun. If you got any ideas, let me know. Andy's not sure. Maybe I'll do it alone. I'll have to have Boyer because I need at least one person that can post this because my technology skills are great.
Your internet is also great.
I'm inside. I don't know. I haven't had that problem until this. It's the Double Doink Dynasty podcast that just throws me off. But anyway, we'll come back with you something talking about playoffs and that sort of stuff coming up in the next couple of weeks. But other than that, keep trading. You got a couple of weeks, and we'll see you guys on the flip side.